Welcome back to the show, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, heroes and villains. I'm your host, Deshaun Fauntleroy. I know your time is precious, so we're going to get right into today's show. In today's show, the big idea is the 3 biggest problems that parents face with their student athletes. Show notes, links, conversation, and more at sportsmastery.com/40. As I said before, the 3 biggest problems that parents face with their student athletes. 1, finding the right school. 2, declining academic performance. And 3, mental health care issues. We're going to dive into part 1 right now. One of the biggest problems that parents face with their student athletes is finding the right school. And what do I mean by that? Well, I've came up with my own concept, the triangle theory for balance. And what do I mean by that? You have to consider a school for academics, athletics, and a social standpoint. So we're looking at a school from 3 different areas: academically, athletically, and socially. And at the top of the triangle, the apex is academics, because you want to send your student athlete, your son or daughter, to a school that has people inside of that building or institution that has the energy, loves doing what they're doing, that is going to make an impact to prepare your son or daughter for the next level. Most high schools in the state, whatever state you're in, they have the courses that a student athlete has to take to clear the NCAA clearinghouse. Private school, public school, it doesn't matter. They all have to have it. You see it happen every day. So, a private school might have certain classes that might vary, or certain curriculums, but they all have those core classes. They all have to have chemistry. They all have to have biology. They all have to have calculus and all those math classes that lead up to a certain level. So at the end of the day, you want your kids in a building that has people that cares about the growth of an individual from an academic standpoint. So within that building, they need to be challenged. They have to have some type of college exam preparation in place to get your kids ready for the SAT and ACT, or have the resources for that. So you have to consider that. Now, at the bottom of the base, 1 point is athletics. So it's not so much about wins and losses, because we have a great resource here in the state of Oregon. And if you looked at the 4 or 5 schools that this gentleman has coached at, his overall record is probably below 500. So from certain standards, you might consider that to be a horrible coach as far as getting kids out. But on his teams, he always happens to get 2 to 3 kids off to Division I or 1 AA schools every year. Now, the balance of that is this: because he understands the geographic landscape and he knows how to evaluate talent, and he has connections with coaches, and these coaches value him as a trusted resource. He helps anywhere from 20 to 30 kids from different schools around the state get to Division I, Division I AA, Division II, Division III NAIA, community college every year, because he's a trusted resource for college coaches and college recruiters. So wins and losses don't necessarily mean everything. State championships don't mean everything. Winning the league every year doesn't mean everything. Just because you go to a winning school doesn't mean you're going to become a Division I athlete. Let's make that clear right now. Are you following me? Now, the flip side of that, the other point on this triangle or on this pyramid at the base, is socially. You have to go to a school where you feel socially comfortable. Are you going to a school that, if you come from a low economic situation and you decide to bus yourself or travel to a private school, and this is a school where most of the kids there, or 70% or more, come from affluent families, and they're driving BMWs and Mercedes Benzes to school every day, how are you going to deal with that? What are your plans and strategies to not let that affect you socially, emotionally, or psychologically? Are you going to be getting called racial slurs? Are you going to be bullied? These are things you have to consider in choosing a high school. You have to consider the academics, you have to consider the connection of the coaches, and you have to consider the social dynamics. Are you going to be comfortable? Are you going to make friends? Are you going to be ostracized? Or are you just going to be a person that's there to play sports? It all catches up to you from a psychic standpoint. Now, you always hear this when it comes to finding the right school for the student athlete. The biggest thing that I hear, and I know you fellow coaches hear that are listening to this and also the parents of these athletes is that high school coaches recruit. Sure, it happens every day. It happens all the time. But there's a small percentage of people that do that. The best ones do it. They just have more ethics. They do it better than others, and it's done real subtle. Now, I'm not backing coaches that go out and purposely and aggressively recruit middle school athletes to come to their school or athletes at different high schools to bring them over to their school. Like I said before, I'm defending coaches on this because this probably happens anywhere from 7 to 10% of the time as far as coaches being a direct influence. Now, speaking of influencers, who influences you? I get influenced by people. I have friends, I have family members that influence me to make certain decisions. Amazon influences me to buy books. When I read books, that author might influence me to buy other books. I have friends, I have colleagues that influence me. So who are some of the biggest influencers? Let's put the coaches aside. The biggest influencers happen to be fellow athletes. The biggest influence happen to be parents of other athletes. Some of the biggest influence happen to be AAU coaches, select team coaches, and club coaches. And I'm not saying this in a bad way. I'm actually defending these guys here. I know the AAU coaches, they get a lot of flack because they play a lot of games in the spring and the summer. Athletes tend to get injured. But what I'm talking about right now is AAU coaches, parents, other athletes, select team coaches, club coaches. I'm saying this because they're the biggest providers of information because they're around these athletes more than they would be in a regular season versus playing 20 to 30 games when they might play anywhere from 50, 80 to 100 games over the spring or summer. I'm not saying it's good, but they're around the athletes a lot in terms of understanding what they're physically capable of, understanding their emotional dynamics, and understanding where they are socially. So they can provide great information and resources when they know the geographic landscape of high schools in an area in terms of giving a parent information or explaining what school or what area they might be fit to matriculate from an academic, athletically, and social dynamic. So think about that. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm not saying it's good, but I do know that somebody has to be out there that can provide sound information that are going to influence you in the right way. And oftentimes, if kids are been playing on club, select, or AAU teams, they know each other a lot. And then they get to a point where they just want to go to school together. You can't knock that. You can't blame it. Sometimes it is just what it is. People want to play with people that they're comfortable with. Does it always work? Absolutely not. We'll get more into that later, and we'll talk about the hows and the whys. But how does this all happen? Well, let's take a look at social media because social media makes it easier for athletes, parents, and coaches to contact, recruit, persuade, convince other parents, athletes, and coaches. So what's the solution to this? I mean, when you're going through a maze and trying to understand the social, political, financial, geographic, and religious dynamics of an institution, neighborhood, or community, it could be disheartening in the end if you don't understand that. Once again, when you're picking a high school, it goes beyond just the high school. We're talking about the people in the high school. We're talking about the businesses that are connected to it. We're talking about the community that surrounds it from a social, political, financial, geographic, and religious landscape and dynamic. How do you navigate this? I'm talking to you parents right now because you have to help your son or daughter, student athlete, to establish a legacy. Look that word up. Look up the word legacy because this is beyond goals. A goal of getting to college, getting to Division I, winning a state championship. That's just the destination. But the legacy is something that survives generations. We have to start considering building a legacy right now. How do you want to be remembered? When you reach a certain goal, what does that look like? So we talked about legacy. Now you have to have a vision. What does it look like when you do achieve that goal? What is it going to feel like? And the last one and biggest of this is mindset. You have to establish a mindset that has systems and strategies in place to handle success and setbacks. What do I mean by success? I have a term I call success intoxication, because you can have success early on in your high school career as a sophomore playing varsity, and then you stop working because you've arrived at the destination when you win that state championship. Then what? You get a few letters from recruiters. Then what? I've seen kids stop working. They start coming to practice late. They get injured more in practice. They lollygag in practice and basically bullshit their way out of a scholarship, bullshit their way out of class, bullshit their way out of success. So you have to have a system in place to handle early success, or what I call success intoxication. You stop practicing, you stop doing your skills training, you stop doing your strength training, or you minimize it because you think you've arrived already. You're setting yourself up to failure if this happens. Also, you have to have a mindset that has systems and strategies in place to handle setbacks such as injury, having bad games, making social mistakes. Parents, you have to have your student athlete evaluated for their learning disabilities. And what I mean by this is you don't want to put your kid, your student athlete, in a building or institution and set them up for failure if they don't have the resources or people that's going to provide the energy to help them matriculate beyond. You have to have your student athlete, your son or daughter, in an institution that has people that are there that's going to help them overcome their disabilities or manage that. Now, when we talk about the physical side, I would say all parents should have their kids evaluated by more than one objective and unbiased coach or talent evaluator. And there's no better place to be than going to the camps that are held on college campuses by college coaches. That is the best. I'm not talking about satellite camps. I'm talking about college camps on a college campus that are ran by college coaches so you can get the truth. Sometimes we have parents that think their athletes are better than they are. And I get it, because you want to put your son or daughter in the best place. But I'm asking you to be objective. Take your emotions out of it. Not everybody can play D1. Not everybody has the genetics or work ethic to play Division I sports. But if you have the grades, you can set yourself up for a lifetime of success by going to that small private Division III school. You can set yourself up with success by going to that small private NAIE school. Something to think about. So I want you to think about that. And on a deeper level, think about what you think about when it comes to getting your son or daughter to the next level that's in an appropriate situation and dynamic for him or her. Now, as I said before, I know I'm telling you a lot. My goal is to have you thinking about this. You have to have conversations with the high school coaches. You have to get to know these different high school coaches. You have to learn to evaluate and have discussions with these high school coaches so you can take this information in to make the best decision for your son or daughter, because they often evaluate your son or daughter. You have to evaluate them as people. You have to be able to look them in the eye. You have to be able to look at them in a way and observe their body language to tell if they're lying to you or bullshitting to you, because coaches are salesmen. I've talked about this in prior episodes. Now, on the surface level, I want y'all looking at coaches. You got to look at wins and losses, because if they have 4 straight winning seasons, they've won 4 straight championships, been to 4 straight semifinals, quarterfinals, that coach might be in line to be pulled up to the university level. He might be in line to get a job at a national powerhouse where the income gets raised by $75,000 to $125,000 on top of what they're already making. So certain things happen when you start increasing your stature in the sports community for being known as a winner, being known as a good person and taking care of people. Other people are going to follow you, people that you don't even know, people that you don't ever see, and you might get a phone call one day, the coach of this state Poly Institute or technical school that's won 4 straight championships and the coach just left and you're being offered $200,000. Parents, you have to think about this. Again, on the surface level, you have to look at have they had 4 straight losing seasons, because that coach's head could metaphorically be on the chopping block. So at the end of the day, I want you to make an attempt as parents and student athletes to get to know different coaches. What do other coaches say about, a coach that you're considering? Do your research. Talk to other athletes and coaches. Talk to assistant coaches. Talk to school teachers. Talk to other administrators in the school. You have to do your research. Sometimes finding the right school can be difficult. You can get to one place and figure out a year or two down the road that this wasn't the right school for my son or daughter. I had a kid that I worked with a couple years ago. He was at an affluent school, at an affluent community. Mom happens to be divorced. He's a biracial kid, and he would get stigmatized for that. He was going through some things at home. Most of it was because he wasn't embraced into the community, and his coaches made it all about sports, where they would talk to him in a way that, I don't care what you have going on at home, quote, I need you to focus on football right now. And all they were focused on was him playing sports in football because he was in a 6'4", 250-pound frame as a defensive end. The powers that be, his connections got him landed at a different school for his senior year. Now that kid is at Boise State University because he ended up going to a school where for that 1 year, that school that he transferred to, they took care of him. They let him matriculate. They let him be himself. And they took a deep dive into understanding his mom and their social economic dynamic. So again, before you make a decision, you have to get to know people and see if that support is going to be there and when you're in certain situations. The three biggest problems that parents face with their student athletes: declining academic performance. Why? Student athletes don't think their teammates take academics as seriously as they do. Why is this phenomenon important? Because when an athlete thinks that the rest of the team doesn't care about their academics, that athlete tries to fit in by pretending not to care either. In a perverse form of peer pressure, when some athletes tweet about classes being worthless, that may be what student athletes tell each other in an effort to fit in, based on the mistaken belief that if they care about academics, they are in an uncool minority. All of this creates a distressing and self-perpetuating cycle. Tight-knit student athletes will seek ways of fitting into a culture that they perceive as neglecting academics, by defaulting into majors of dubious merit and spending less time doing homework, knowing that their habits are observed by teammates. When their teammates observe these habits, it reaffirms the false conviction that caring about academics is an unfortunate aberration best suppressed. Author Sarah Etchison explains that there are student athletes who want to excel in the classroom but think their teammates would judge them for it, so they study a little less, take an easier course load, and it turns out that's how virtually everyone on the team feels. But there's never an opportunity to realize, oh, damn, all of us really care about what's happening on the academic side. This is a phenomenon that psychologists call pluralistic ignorance. What is pluralistic ignorance? Pluralistic ignorance is when private preferences differ from perceptions of group norms. It leads people to engage in public behaviors that align more with the perceived norms than their true preferences. The tragedy is that the norms are false. In reality, everybody would be happier if they just behaved in line with their preferences. And just as you thought, pluralistic ignorance has also been shown to underlie the phenomena of binge drinking on campuses. A study conducted at Princeton University revealed that a majority of students who drank excessively did so not because they wanted to, but because they felt that was what their friends wanted to do. Once they all had a more accurate assessment of what the group norm was, the amount of alcohol declined. This suggests that helping student athletes do better in the classroom may be as simple as letting them know that teammates care as much about academics as they do. Many of them care deeply about the education that they are receiving and should care, because financial success in professional sports will elude the vast majority of you. So what I want to conclude and impress upon you is that as the NCAA and the media focus more attention on athletes' academic performance, one of the best ways to improve the education of the student athlete is to give them license to pursue their academic goals by making it clear that their teammates and society as a whole support them in their academic endeavors. For this to happen, we still need collegiate and professional stars speaking up and about the importance of education instead of tweeting about the pointlessness of going to class. the three biggest problems that parents face with their student athletes. We've discussed finding the right school, declining academic performance, and we're going to close out with mental health issues such as depression, bullying, substance abuse, eating disorders. So what we need is more parental vigilance in watching for signs of mental distress. We also hear about concussions. We hear about concussions all the time. And I certainly get that. I certainly understand that. But there's more mental health cases and care needed on campus every day. But we have a challenge with detecting and treating mental health issues in high school athletes is broaching concerns without making young people feel stigmatized. And you've heard me say this before. There's no substitute for a coach getting to know their student athletes and paying attention when you see their behavior change so that you can casually ask, what's happening? What's going on, man? Let's sit down and have a conversation. Because I want you to be able to keep that dialogue going. You have to keep that dialogue going to make your student athlete feel safe talking to you about whatever they might be going through. So what I want to impress upon you is some recommendations that are intended to make sure coaches, teachers, athletic trainers, strength coaches, school nurses, other school administrators, and parents all know the warning signs for psychological problems and have plans in place for referring students to mental health care professionals when necessary. Along with the ordinary pressures of high school, athletes face many situations that can contribute to mental health problems, such as being cut from a team, getting injured, making mistakes in competition, being on a team or at a school that does nothing but lose every single game, receiving media attention and competing for scholarships, not to mention preparing for the ACT and SAT and going to take the exam. These are all stressful situations where you get compared to each other socially that can lead to depression and anxiety. Often physical injuries spur psychological ones, especially if the injury requires surgery and weeks or months on the sidelines. The injury itself can be a trigger that unmasks underlying psychological issues. For student athletes who may be prone to periods of moodiness, parents and coaches should intervene if the behavior changes continue over time. If someone is withdrawn or isolating or not spending time with their friends and having difficulty sleeping and it persists, then you have to be concerned. For example, athletes with eating disorders might exercise compulsively, suffer from extreme hydration or gastrointestinal problems. Athletes being bullied might have unexplained injuries, lost personal items, or complain of frequent headaches or stomach pain. What happens when that iPhone comes up missing or a pair of shoes, all of a sudden they're not wearing anymore. They say they got broken into their locker. Those doing the bullying might become increasingly aggressive, have unexplained money or belongings, or get into frequent verbal or physical altercations. You know who I'm talking about, the kid that has 2 or 3 watches. You understand the socioeconomic situation, has a number of brand new shoes, coming to school with different clothes all the time. I'm not indicting anybody. I'm not convicting anybody, but these are some things that we must think about and consider. Students who are depressed might lack energy or lose interest in sports or have a change in appetite that leads them to gain or lose a visible amount of weight. Often student athletes who abuse drugs and alcohol also have an underlying mental health issue, such as depression. Coaches, parents, raise your hand if you were a binge drinker in high school or college. Of course, my hand was raised because I might have been going through some type of social dynamic with my peers, my coaches, my family. Maybe I wasn't getting the best reps, the best number of reps. Maybe that wasn't explained why to me. Maybe I was at the wrong school, but I had to figure out things on my own. And when I began to figure out things on my own, it's because I had a guide to get me through school. I had a guide to lead me to success in the semi-pro and indoor football ranks. I had a guide that showed me the way to graduate from Western Oregon. That's what this is about, is having a guide. So what I want to conclude and impress upon you is that parents and coaches and other adult administrators in the school athletic community need to take on responsibility, not just to make sure that the knees, hips, and shoulders of our student athletes are healthy, but also that their minds are healthy too. The three biggest problems that parents face with their student athletes, you've heard it here first. Finding the right school, declining academic performance, and mental health care issues. For more information, I want you to visit sportsmastery.com/mastermind group, as our mastermind group is starting to take off and we explore all these different dynamics. Again, check out sportsmastery.com/mastermind. Peace and blessings.